Hej och varmt välkommen till dagens video som faktiskt är av den teoretiska slaget och det handlar om anatomi. Claire Eccleston, hon är en fantastiskt inspirerande kvinna. Hon har så mycket erfarenhet. Hon är barnmorska i grunden men också kranosakrialterapeut. Hon jobbar med STREAM som alltså är Scar Tissue Remediation, ärrvävnadsupplösning inuti kvinnors bäckenbottnar och underliv. Och har många andra typer av certifieringar. Men framförallt så har hon så otroligt gedigen kunskap och erfarenhet kring kvinnors kroppar. Och anledningen till att jag vill ha med den här videon i utmaningen är just för att understryka hur många delar av det anatomiska i vår bäckenbotten och vårt bäcken som vi oftast inte har koll på. Framförallt för att det har varit så mycket fokus på muskler och knip. Men det är så många andra delar som är väsentliga när det kommer till att läka bäckenbotten. Och just i den här videon så kommer Claire prata mer om ligamenten som sitter i och runt och under bäckenbotten. Så jag hoppas att ni ska få en lite tydligare bild av anatomin i ett mer holistiskt sätt att se på bäckenbotten. Och jag lovar att det finns mycket mer att lära utöver det som Claire delar i den här videon. Så enjoy och låt mig veta vad du tycker i kommentarerna.
I'm a mum, a grandma, a midwife, a craniosacral therapist, a spinning babies approved trainer, and a STREAM practitioner specializing in scar tissue remediation and internal pelvic work. And this is part 3 of the anatomy series. So we've looked at already the bony pelvis and all its structures and how it sits. We've looked at the organs and ligaments and soft tissue like the psoas and the respiratory diaphragm, the muscles of the pelvic floor, the external genitalia. And today, in this third video, we'll just look a little more at the ligaments because they have a really big impact on how birth goes, how your comfort is, if you're experiencing or have been diagnosed with something like prolapse or incontinence. The ligaments can have an impact on that as well. And of course, this series is looking at our anatomy in relationship to perineal massage. But this is perineal massage with a little bit more depth and a little bit more rationale of the science and anatomy of our body and what we're touching underneath and how that might affect us. So as with the other anatomical videos, I will do a mixture of screen sharing and working with props and models. So often we think about the uterus, the womb, just sitting very sitting in space, not doing anything. But actually the womb is held by this is not a womb, of course, this is a hot air balloon. But the womb is held by about 13 different ligaments and it moves all the time. It moves when our bladder is full, it moves when we are pregnant, it moves if our bowel is full. And of course we talked about the fascia, that the bladder and the bowel are actually, the bladder and the uterus are connected by fascia. In fact, the bowel and the uterus and all of that area and our gut, our intestines is all connected within the fascia of the peritoneum. So it's all connected. But there's about 13 different ligaments that suspend and hold the uterus in place. And we'll just look at the major, they're not major and all minor, but we'll look at 3 of them today in terms of how they might impact comfort and how they might have an impact when you're doing perineal massage or internal work. So if you can imagine the womb, in New Zealand we call it the whare tangata, the house of the tangata people, is held by these ligaments. You can imagine these cars are almost like, this is the womb if you could imagine as a metaphor, and these ropes are like the ligaments, and the cars are like the pressure or the attachment points onto bone. So if you can imagine, if the bone is sitting slightly differently, which most of ours do, or if one side's pulling tighter than another, that can affect the tensegrity or tension on that ligament, and that might affect how the womb sits, or how the womb sits in relationship with bladder, bowel, fallopian tube, and ovaries. And I love this next one. It's our round ligaments, and these are super sexy. And I'll tell you why. And I've shown it here with a pregnant person. And my apologies that the majority of anatomical models assume that the human population all have pink skin, and I know this isn't the case. So my apologies for the lack of variation in skin tone colours on these drawings. So the round ligament you can see here in this is a pregnant womb. Here we have rectum, spine, uterosacral ligaments, which we'll talk about in a minute. Here we have bladder, and this is our symphysis pubis, the front bone. Here would be cervix and vagina, fallopian tube, and ovary. And you can see there the round ligament goes, it attaches within the womb at about 3/4 of the way up. And it comes down over the front of the symphysis pubis. And actually, you can see here within this anatomical model, the round ligament often comes down into our vulva. So if you're doing perineal massage, of course, you're going to be making contact with the perineum, the space between the vagina and the anus, but also good to know that if you are making contact with the vulva, and it can be quite beneficial to do this in pregnancy if you feel like it and if it feels good for you, that you're making contact with the round ligaments. So on a model, this is a wonderful uterus model here. So of course with the uterus you have a thicker upper segment and you have a thinner lower segment. This is the cervix. Here's some cervical ligaments, and here's the round ligaments. So we think, of course, that our uterus maybe just sits like stagnant in space, but it doesn't. It's very mobile, and it tends to sit more leaning forward. These round ligaments, as we talked about, they come from about 3/4 of the way up, and they're knitted into the fabric of our wombs. Of course, this is all surrounded as well by broad ligament and fascia that we'll talk about. So these round ligaments come down in front of the pubic bone, over the top here, over the ova obturator, and they extend down into our vulva. So when we're making love, whether we are pregnant or non-pregnant, what happens is if our vulva becomes engorged with blood, which hopefully happens if we're feeling aroused and we're feeling good, the vulva becomes engorged. What happens then is the engorged vulva helps these round ligaments to contract, which lifts the womb more forward, but not like that. It lifts the womb more forward, which lifts up the cervix in the vaginal canal, so that if you're making love, there's more space, more lengthening in the vaginal canal for if you're having heterosexual sex for a penis or whatever else you might be choosing to make love with. So the round ligaments have a really important role to play with lovemaking and comfort. And the way you can access those, if you're working with perineal massage, you can access them through the vulva as an endpoint. And that's why sometimes if women are making love and they're not fully aroused, they can have pain in lovemaking if these round ligaments haven't contracted and the womb hasn't lifted up, so that the cervix isn't lifting up in the vaginal canal, so that it's not having that lengthening happening. So sometimes then you get a penis or whatever else you might be using banging onto the cervix. And that's why also sometimes people with cesareans might feel discomfort after if they haven't given birth vaginally, but they might have pain in lovemaking if there's an element of where the cesarean scar is holding up these round ligaments, so that when the person's getting engorged and enroused with lovemaking, their round ligaments don't have that same level of smooth movement to be able to support the womb to lift up and the cervix to move up out of the vaginal canal and the vaginal canal to elongate. So you're touching a lot. When you're touching vulvas, you're touching sometimes deeper internal tissues as well. And again, this is a pregnant model, but we have a round ligament and a broad ligament, whether we are pregnant or non-pregnant. Myself, I'm currently not pregnant. My round ligament that we just looked at is probably 2 or 3 centimeters. For a pregnant person, it's probably 20 to 30. Here you can see a broad ligament, and the broad ligament wraps around the front of the baby. The broad ligament is this thin piece of tissue here. It's actually thick type fascia. And this, you can see here, the grey area, the broad ligament wraps around the uterus. It encompasses the round ligament, so it holds them. It wraps around the womb and it attaches into the sacrum. So the broad ligament would wrap around and then attach into the sacral area. And if the broad ligament also is tighter than one side than the other, that's going to affect how the round ligament sits and how the womb sits, which can affect our comfort levels. It can affect ovulation. It can affect birthing. It can affect lovemaking comfort. So again, we talked about the tensegrity, the interconnectedness, but also the exquisiteness that our body has around trying to always bring itself into balance and trying to always bring itself into comfort. And if you're doing perineal massage directly, you're not going to probably directly contact the broad ligament. But if you are working internally and you're working up in around the sacrum, for some people that broad ligament attachment might be low enough in the sacrum for you to reach internally. And then we have the uterosacral ligaments. So you can see here, this is our bones, and here's the rectum and the colon. Here's the bladder, here's the uterus, and here's the uterosacral ligaments. So they go from the back of the uterus into the bottom of the sacrum. And I'll just see if my next picture has that as well. So we talked about in the other anatomical videos how the uterosacral ligaments, for some people they connect high up in the sacrum, for some lower down. For some people they actually don't connect into the bone. They connect more into the tissue that attaches to the bone. And a big thank you to Rachel Shapiro for her work on looking at the uterosacral ligaments. So our ligaments affect how our organs can move. Our ligaments affect how our organs are held within the space, and the ligaments are affected by the fascia and by the tissue. And they help hold the tensegrity of everything that's there. So I hope this third anatomical video has helped give some more information around making sense and putting the puzzle pieces together for the exquisiteness of your anatomy. And I look forward to seeing you in another video.